Hi there, this is Becky from Nomadic Knits, and today I wanted to share a really brief tutorial for those of you who are new to Colorwork. We're just going to go over some very basic tips and tricks to make your first attempt at Colorwork a fun and successful one. The first thing I want to share with you is how to read a Colorwork chart, because this might be new to some of you. If you've never done Colorwork before, you've probably seen these before, but you might not have known how to read them. So the way that a chart works is you read them from right to left and from bottom to top. So for this chart, this chart is actually from last year's 12 Days of Knitmas, Mystery Knit Along. So you would knit this round first, and you can see from the key up here that the white boxes are knit in your main color and that the blue boxes are knit in your contrast color. So each one of these rows will repeat until you reach the end of your round. So you will knit all of these stitches and continue knitting until you reach the end of the round. And your round is divisible by the appropriate number of stitches in the chart that is included in your pattern. So for round 2, for example, you will knit 2 stitches in your main color, 2 stitches in your contrast color. Then you will knit 5 stitches in your main color, 4 stitches in your contrast color, 2 stitches in your main color, and then you will start again over here on the right and keep repeating until you reach the end of the round. So that is how you read a Colorwork chart. Our next step is to do the actual knitting. So for this example, I'm not following any specific Colorwork chart. I'm just going to show you the basics of how to hold your yarn and how to make sure that you aren't pulling your stitches too tight. So because I'm a right-handed knitter, generally when I go to add in my second color, I'll just poke that through the stitch that requires a contrast color and add it in just like that. And I normally hold my main color in my right hand and my contrast color in my left hand. And this is how I tension it. I just wrap it around my pinky, put those 2 fingers over it, and put it on top of my pointer finger there. And this allows me to hold and tension both colors at the same time without having to pick them up and put them down. You can pick them up and put them down as well. That's absolutely fine. There are a lot of different ways to do this. This is just how I do it. I will show you the other ways in just a moment. But first, I just want to show you basically how you're going to knit with 2 colors to make this Colorwork pattern. So just as if you were knitting regularly, except you're leaving a little bit of slack in the back so that you don't crush that stitch in between and pull your yarn too tight. So you're just knitting one and then the other. Perhaps your pattern calls for 2 of these stitches, which means that you're going to have to leave a little bit more slack here so as not to pull too tight. Something that helps many people, especially when you first start doing Colorwork, but some people continue to do it. I still sometimes switch my needle size. So you can go up a needle size to ensure that you aren't pulling your stitches too tightly. So we'll do another one of these main colors, and then we'll do another one of these guys. And you can see the floats, that's what they're called in the back, are these floats. And in some pieces of Colorwork, you'll hear people talk about catching the floats. We aren't doing any Colorwork that has long enough floats that require them to be caught. So, but what catching the floats is when you wrap it with your other color so that it's not hanging loose in the back of your work where it can get caught. This is especially helpful when you're knitting a garment in Colorwork, because you don't want it to catch on, say, another shirt with buttons on it that you're wearing underneath a sweater or something like that. So that is how I hold my yarn for Colorwork. some people, let's see if I can do this, also hold their yarn, basically, I'm not going to get the tension right, but they basically hold both of them over one finger. So when you wrap around, you just grab one or you grab the other. So that is another option for those of you who aren't comfortable trying to use both hands to knit with color. And then there's always the option to simply, sorry about that, to simply use one color at a time. And you just pick them up as you go and set them down. And there are a lot of wonderful knitters out there who do it exactly like that as well. So whichever one works for you, that's the one that you should do. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is something that I don't want you to worry about too much, especially if this is your first time doing color work, but it does bear mentioning because me personally, I didn't learn about this until I had been knitting for quite some time, and I had already been doing color work for a while. And I learned about this and it was an eye-opener for me. So there is a thing called color dominance. And what that means is that when you are working a color work pattern, one color tends to be more dominant than the other. Now this varies from knitter to knitter, how significant the dominance is, but I think it's worth talking about. So if you want a specific contrast color to pop in your knitting, you generally want to hold, if you're using two hands for knitting, like I was when we started, like this, then you generally speaking want your dominant color to be over here in your left hand. And what that does is it just brings that color to the forefront as you're knitting with it. So if you are not holding your yarn like this, then the best way to think about this is that you want your dominant yarn to always be coming from beneath. So I'm going to make another stitch here so that you can see what I'm talking about. So when I make a stitch and it comes across here, you can see that it's coming over the top of that contrast color yarn. And now when I go to make a stitch with the contrast color yarn, you can see that it's coming beneath that purl bump on the back of the work. And ensuring that that is what is happening, that your preferred dominant color is coming below as you work your stitches, that's how you make sure that this color is going to pop more clearly in your work. So I hope that that is helpful to you, and I hope that you really enjoy this first foray into color work. It can seem a little bit fiddly sometimes as you get started, but that's okay. Don't be intimidated. You're going to do great. Like I said, this is going to be a nice, simple intro to color work pattern, but it's also going to look really fantastic. So I hope that you enjoy. Merry Knitmas!